Did you do enough?
That was particularly ugly.
I'm just curious. Do you?
On that, I think I did.
Yeah.
But on other things as well. I mean, when our party, I wonder, during rallies when the chants lock her up, we shouldn't be the party for jailing your political opponents. And anybody at that rally, anybody at those rallies ought to stand up and say that's inappropriate. We shouldn't be doing that. And I wish we as a party and elected officials would do more of that. Or when particularly ugly conspiracy theories go out, or simply fake news, stuff that is just demonstrably false, we ought to stand up and say, hey, that's just not right.
What if more leaders in your party don't? I mean, is there a point where you say to yourself, because I read this book, and again, I go back, it's as much of an indictment on the Republican leadership of the last 15 years as it is on Donald Trump. In fact, it's more of an indictment on the Republican leadership. And I am just curious, did you think about leaving the party?
No, not at all. I'm a proud Republican, lifelong Republican. And I'm from Arizona. Arizona tends to elect independent-minded people and people who stand on principle. And so I'm doing what I think my voters expect of me. But I think, for example, in 2006, when the party in particular had given way to inappropriate spending, earmark spending, a couple of our colleagues ended up in jail. If you remember, the mantra, drain the swamp, was employed very effectively by the Democrats in describing the Republican Party at that time. And I think had we stood up at that time, then we wouldn't have lost those majorities in the House and the Senate. And I fear that we might do the same again. You
had strong words in this book, and yet we looked at your voting record, and at this point, you vote more with the president than even some others in the Senate who've taken the president on. You, according to our count here, 93.5% of the time you have voted with the president. Is there a point where you will vote potentially against your own ideological interests in order to send a message to Republican leadership, in order to send a message to President Trump? I guess the question is, when does character trump ideology for you?
Well, what we've done in the Senate so far, in the first 6 months of any presidency, we're in the personnel business, and all we're doing really is approving the president's cabinet picks, justices. The president named a great Supreme Court justice. I was glad to support him in that. Regulatory policy, I think he's on the right track. I think tax reform, he has good instincts there. I'll probably be with him. But on many things like trade, I expect to vote against the president, and I'll stand up just like I did when President Bush was there. I voted against No Child Left Behind and the prescription drug benefit, but I was with him on most things. And I think that I'll do the same here. I'll vote with the president when I believe he's right and vote against him when I think he's wrong.
Okay, that doesn't sound, the tone you're taking here doesn't sound like the man who wrote this book. The man who wrote this book sounds like you feel as if there's a sense of urgency here. Things are so broken in the conservative movement, we can't stand pat anymore. But you sound like you're figuring out how to tiptoe around this still. Is there a point where you're done tiptoeing?
Let me just say that during the voting, we haven't voted on much where you could distinguish yourself from the direction the president is going. Having said that, some of the executive orders that he's taken, for example, on the Muslim ban, well, it was a Muslim ban during the campaign, what became the travel ban, I very much spoke up against that. I don't think that that's in our national security interest. I don't think that's the direction to go. The immigration proposal that was put forward last week, I think it's fine to move to a point system. We did that in the bipartisan bill that we did in the Senate. Right. But you can't cut immigration, legal immigration, in half. And so I'll stand up against that. And the behavior in the White House as well. I mean, referring to our colleagues across the aisle as losers or clowns is just not the direction to go if we are going to solve the problems in a conservative way that we need to. So I'll stand up every time to the president when he's doing things that I don't think he should be doing. But in terms of votes, we haven't had that many other than personnel to distinguish ourselves either way.
How do you fix the Senate, though? It's a very leadership-driven operation. Both parties have accepted this premise that the rank and file are not to decide where legislation goes, only the leadership. Part of your book indicts that leadership. How should Mitch McConnell respond to your book?
Well, I think that we realize the limits of what we can do, with one party, with just Republican votes. And I'm not faulting Mitch McConnell at all. He has a tough job. But I do think that we're going to sit down across the aisle with our colleagues and fix these things. If we're going to fix the big things that we need to fix, in particular our debt and deficit, that has to be done with Republicans and Democrats. There's no way one party will take the risk, and that's what is so broken about our politics, is we just can't get together on the big things. And as conservatives, we simply can't enact conservative policy if we continue these polemics.
Well, I'm going to have to leave it there. We're actually going to discuss the lost middle in American politics.